Welcome to MAP, the bi-weekly market access podcast hosted by me, Dr. Stefan Walzer. I am the innovator of Market Access 4.0 and a health economist by training and working in the fields of market access, reimbursement, pricing, and health economics since 2004. Discover Market Access 4.0 and unveil the future with our innovative solutions. Max Insights, our fast and easy AI-based reimbursement planning platform. Dobo, our new revolutionizing way of creating reimbursement dossiers across the globe with the first and only dossier writing AI bot. Cubo, our new AI-based objection handling platform. And Waffle, train with Waffle's virtual reality genius in an immersive environment and with an AI-based counterpart. We are Market Access 4.0, so check out our website, marketaccess4-0.com. And now let's dive into the current discussions, processes, and trends in market access across the globe. Welcome to another episode of the Market Access podcast. Today again, with our good expert and good friend, Thomas Hammerschmidt. Welcome to the show, Thomas. Thomas is a professor of Pharma Management at the Technical University of Applied Sciences in Rosenheim in Bavaria. And the key topic, as we all discussed for the last 6 to 8 weeks, is the kind of reform debate of the pharmaceutical market in Germany. Welcome, Thomas, to the show.
Yeah, hello, Stefan. Nice to speak to you again. Third time, I think, in this show, in this podcast. And the time is getting sooner that we speak. So there's a lot to be discussed on policy, AMNOG and reforms and so on in Germany.
Absolutely. It's the right timing and the right expert, of course. So let's just directly deep dive a bit into the topic. And maybe we just start a bit top level. What has happened since maybe April 2026, Thomas?
Well, in March, the Finance Commission made their proposal for a cost containment policy. It's not an efficiency or a structural reform of the sickness funds. It's just cost containment to balance the increase in the income base of the sickness funds and the expenditure, which is leading to a broader gap in the last years, with expenditures rising on a really faster level than the income, and so contribution rates were getting higher and higher during the last years, and now the policy said, well, we want to stop that. Important to note for the person out there is that this is only the first of two steps. The first step is cost containment, keep the contribution rate on the level we have, and we expect at the end of the year a proposal for structural reforms. So what happens till this proposal of the Finance Commission? Well, the Ministry of Health made a proposal for a law, and this was last week in the government, and the Chancellor and all the ministers gave their okay for a slightly revised version, which will impact pharma industry in a few points. We will likely discuss in the next few minutes. And this is the start of the parliament procedure. So we will see somewhere in June, July, probably the hearings and then the discussions in the parliament. And then the law will come into effect in this version, in a revised version. So this process has options for some changes, but I think the kernel of the proposal will remain as it is.
Yeah, I guess so. I think, when I've seen the, let's say, committee proposal, as you has already as well alluded towards, and then as well the suggested law, I think it's a lot what was already kind of suggested within the committee. Not everything, but quite a lot. And I think then there were a couple of these further pieces included. As of course you as well just said, I mean, pharma management is of course core. So we're also speaking around that. So what are the key, let's say, issues or the key kind of themes you would say are mostly relevant for the pharmaceutical industry out of the, as of now, proposed law, which has just passed, let's say, the governmental, approval in a way?
I think there are mainly 3 points. So one is a new kind of dynamic rebate, which has a lot of potential for savings for the sickness funds, but means reduced revenues for the companies. The second is there are some changes in the AMNOG, some positive, but also some negative ones. And the third one is kind of new form of tender for patented drugs. And that's something very new in the system. And I think that will have a lot of discussion in the next few weeks. So I think we can talk about the 3 points of the proposal. I think there's something about vaccines also, a tightener rebate, because we've seen a lot of price increase in vaccines in the last few years. And so, but there's only a minor part concerning the whole pharmaceutical industry, the innovative industry.
Yeah, no, agree. And I fully agree, I think, with those 3 kind of topics. I think there are a couple of, let's say, minor kind of things in there also for other areas, but I agree. I think the most important ones, especially, let's say, when we are speaking about, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry, are probably the 3 you have just mentioned. Maybe we just start in that order. I think dynamic rebate you mentioned, I think the important one would be, this would be a mandatory rebate, right? It's not just like we can discuss or negotiate around it. This is mandatory. So what does it mean being dynamic? I mean, a rebate is a rebate, but what is it?
Yeah, so the rebate is complicated itself because we have some rules for fixed reference price drugs. We have some rules for generics. But if we look at the patented drug part, there is a mandatory rebate of 7% at the moment. And now there will be an additional rebate starting next year. It will be 3.5 percentage points in the beginning. And then every time in the half of the year from July on, it will be changed according to the gap between the increase in the pharmaceutical expenditure and the increase of the income base of the sickness funds. So the higher the gap is the higher the dynamic mandatory rebate will be. And the assumptions the Finance Commission has done is to say, over the next few years, the income base will increase by something like 3.5%. And in the long run, about 3%. And the pharmaceutical expenditure have increased in the last few years with something like 7%. So in this gap, which develops exponentially, that will have to be lowered by this dynamic rebate. And one can calculate that if we make this kind of assumptions, that the dynamic rebate will start by something like 3.5 and will develop to something like up to 10% point in addition to the 7 we already have mandatorily until 2030. So in a very short period of time, it takes a lot of money from the patented drugs, and think in total this is something like 7 to 8 billion euros less sales for the companies.
I mean, this is huge. I mean, it's of course 2 different things, right? I mean, one is the financial impact in general, what you just as well said, which is also very important. It's a 7% plus that dynamic kind of additional rebate. So we're not speaking about 3.5%, but 3.5 plus 7, or even the change from that 3.5 to any other number you've just alluded towards. But I think that's one piece, right? The other thing is also the uncertainty. I mean, when we're going to negotiations and trying to find the kind of right price and so on, but also for the internal accounting, I mean, this is difficult to say, right? I mean,
It's really difficult. We cannot project really precisely what will happen in the next year. So it depends not only on the sales of the product you're negotiating as a company, but it depends on the overall sales across every product. Even the generic products are within the overall sales and expenditures, but they will not have to pay. So generics will not have to pay this dynamic rebate. So it's something out of the scope of the company itself. So they can contribute, but they have to make expectations. So what will be the likely overall dynamic rebate in the future for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And that makes it very complicated also in the negotiation to find the right price, an acceptable price which is economically feasible to the companies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I fully agree. I think that was, the most important thing when we had a look on it. I mean, how to predict, how to come up with it. I still remember, when we had that mandatory increase of the rebate for, was it 2 or 3 years from, was it 7% to, I don't really remember even, it was 7 to 10% as far as I remember last time, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and just between that kind of uncertainty where people were just not sure, will it be, let's say, renewed? So will it stay to 10%? Will it go back to the 7%? Which was just a simple thing, right? But even that was big debate within companies. And this one is, of course, much more relevant.
And I was, when I heard the Finance Commission, Wolfgang Grein and all his colleagues talking about that, they make the projection until 2030. That was their job to do, to say, how can we keep contribution rate constant until 2030 and then have system reform? And my thought was probably it will stop then, and then we'll have some kind of AMNOG reform, some kind of maybe cost-benefit analysis, which is taken into account, or something else. But now it's not limited. So it can easily go on for the next 10 years. And I've read a projection by the one of the pharmaceutical companies telling it could reach up to 20 or 30%, depending on the overall dynamic in the pharmaceutical market. So, and that's very uncertain, especially when we see the companies now planning to invest into products which will come to the market in 5 years, 10 years time.
Exactly. And I think most importantly, also what you said a bit earlier, you don't have it in your control, right? You cannot do anything. Of course, you can maybe try to stay within given whatever price volume agreements you maybe anyway have as well to agree on. But the rest of it, you don't know what the other companies are doing. You don't know how much maybe the demand is suddenly, which prices are in there, which projections, and so on. So I think this is really, really, difficult. But I think maybe moving a bit to the other parts as well, because I think that is, a big already kind of impact for the industry. Maybe moving a bit to you mentioned already, not the structural ones, but there are also, let's say, kind of, maybe call it adjustments in the AMNOG area. You mentioned about the positives and the negative. You can choose with which whatever you want to start with.
Well, after this dynamic rebate, probably something positive.
Yeah, first. That's good. I like it.
So the first one is there was a combination rebate, an additional rebate if a drug with a negotiated reimbursement price is used in combination with other drugs, then a rebate of 20% could apply. And this is no longer in the law, so that is finished. And the second thing is the guardrails. Are history or will become history in the future. So we go back to the old time at the beginning of the AMNOG. So if you have an additional benefit, even if it's only a minor benefit versus a patented drug, you can achieve a higher price, and you're not limited to the price of the appropriate comparator therapy in this situation. So I think that's very positive because innovation, improvement, additional benefit is rewarded in the future and can be rewarded. And so it would also be tough to negotiate the prices, of course, but at least the guardrails, which were not really a good idea with regard to economic efficiency. Those are or will become history, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. It's not yet through, right? We're still needing to go to the whole kind of legal parliamental piece, right?
Yeah, of course. And there are, of course, if we look at the left or the Green Party, they say, well, we have to control the pharmaceutical expenditure adequately. They are not in the government, so their influence is limited, but there are voices in the parliament which will probably like to see the guardrails also in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just out of the process, I mean, can you maybe as well explain why that has maybe not touched base, or maybe not even touched in the committee kind of proposal? The guardrails were not part of it. I think they were part of the Pharma dialogue, but maybe you can just briefly touch base on that. Was that a separate one?
This is separate. So we have the Pharma dialogue where the Ministry of Health is talking to the pharmaceutical industry and thinking about innovations, thinking about investments in Germany and so on. And I think there it was discussed to reform the guardrails. And the Finance Commission really had the job to say, well, what can we do in addition to save money? So it was not their job to say, well, the guardrails doesn't make sense and therefore quit them. So therefore it was not there. And therefore it was a kind of surprise that this group discussing with the pharmaceutical industry brought something into the law which was not discussed by the Cost Containment Committee.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Fully agree. So, I mean, the guardrails have been in place now for, I think it was roughly 3 years, as far as I remember.
Maybe some more, 3 to 4 years,
maybe 4 years.
22 it started.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was probably January 2022. Yeah, that's. I think that could very well be. And then, of course, there was a bit of a lag until the first one needed to go through it, because there was first the need of benefit assessment by GBA. But having said that, I mean, if I would be sitting in the GKVS field, so the institution, let's say, the umbrella organization, which is running the price negotiations, I would probably still have those close to my heart, right? Meaning I would probably still try to at least negotiate according to those kind of guardrails before. Of course, not official, but would you expect any kind of changes here? But then also, is there maybe the position, because that has happened in the past, is the position maybe a bit better for the umbrella organization of the payers before it goes to the arbitration board? Or would you rather say, maybe let's see, but it's probably still kind of as we had it before?
I think it's more or less kind of as we had it before, probably a little bit tougher. We've done this analysis. I think we talked about that last year, that the GBA decisions were somewhat tougher due to the guardrails. So it's not as before the guardrail reform a few years ago. I think the benefit assessment will stay as tough as they are. And that's also possible to say, well, we don't see added benefits there, or it's minor. So it will not be extremely easy, but at least you can say, well, we have added benefit. We want a markup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I would probably agree with that. I think that's a good thing. So we have had, let's say, a quite big negative with the dynamic mandatory rebate. You mentioned just 2 positive ones: combination rebate out, guardrails, history, which is, I think, a good thing. But I think you mentioned as well, and I know where you're going towards, but there were as well a couple of negative impacts also in and around the AMNOG.
Yeah, I think there's, within the AMNOG, you have to do some kind of price volume agreements to say, well, if we have high volumes, we give additional discounts or we lower the reimbursement price. And that appears not to work adequately, or somebody in the GKVSV has a close connection to the ministry to say, well, we are not confident. Probably the decision of the arbitration board on the price volume agreement, which was in discussion there, was probably a little bit of disappointment to the sickness fund. So now it's it's a new regulation in the AMNOG-related paragraphs about price volume. And I think that's more or less the new standard, because it said there, well, you can negotiate whatever you want, but if you fail to negotiate, you have to apply this formula. And this formula is in the structure similar to what the arbitration board has proposed and has decided in some of the arbitration procedures. So it's a 2-point, or there are two different points to have an additional rebate for certain volumes. One is depending on the acceleration of the growth. So that could be something like 1.7% rebate you have to give. So that's an upper limit for this part. The other part is based on the total volume. So if you have for each 100 million euro sales per year, you have to pay 1% rebate. And I think because of the structure, this will be the new standard. So if you have a 300 million product, you will have to pay 3% of additional rebate based on this price volume regulations. And if we see that we have some products in Germany which have more than 1 billion annual sales, like Keytruda or Eliquis, I think also, that would mean additional 10%. And 10% of 1 billion is quite a lot of money. So this can be calculated and will only apply to new negotiations. But in the long term, the very successful products, which huge sales in Germany, will suffer from this additional rebate. And one has to think about that in the negotiations to cope for it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, just what you said, I mean, it only applies to new negotiations. Maybe I got it wrong, but is it basically really just negotiations or within a new process? Meaning, if, for example, the payer side would stop a contract and just basically recalls, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry back to the table for negotiation, would that also then already apply, or is it something separate?
It would apply to any new negotiation, and that can be if you have a new indication and you have to undergo new benefit assessment and a new price negotiation. Of course, the sickness funds can demand a new negotiation. And here's a risk for those products with high sales that they will do that. They won't do that for a 50 million euro product. But if you have sales like 500 million, then they probably will do.
Yeah, exactly. I know, I fully agree. So that's let's say another additional discount or rebate to the one we were discussed before with the dynamic rebate, even though let's say we had maybe some positives. I mean, where we also just said the guardrails are out, but negotiation might maybe not get easier because maybe also the GBA decisions might have gone as well a bit more into the more difficult side. I mean, there are a lot of more things in there, but you also mentioned a third part, which maybe for a lot of people sound a bit, let's say, controversial, not only controversial, but maybe even contradictory, right? Because it's tenders for patented drugs.
Yeah. And that's completely new. Yeah. This replaced within the law the combination rebate, which so it's the same paragraph 130E. We know since 20 years the rebates as the tenders for generic drugs, and it's very easy. Say, well, it's a similar drug, you make a tender, the cheapest one wins, and then the doctor can prescribe whatever they want. It will be substituted to the patents and tender winner in the end. So that will be done in the pharmacy. Here it's a little bit different. The Finance Commission said, well, we should develop this. And now the government said, well, we give you 5 groups where we start. So it's a decision by the government to say, in these 5 groups, we have a tender across the different pharmaceutical ingredient, and then the winner takes it all, and physicians are forced to prescribe only the winner drug of the tender, and well, they can say, well, I do another drug for this individual patient, but they have to document it, so that's very difficult. And that could lead to interesting situations that you have maybe 2 patients in your physician office. One is with the one sickness fund, one is with the other, and you have to prescribe different, for example, JAK inhibitors for rheumatoid arthritis, just because the one is from the one and the other is from the other sickness funds. So I think that's really difficult because the decision to find the adequate drug for a patient within this group is not done by the physician who knows the patient, who has all the responsibility for the treatment, but it's done by the sickness funds who makes a tender, and the cheapest one wins. And well, the groups mentioned, probably we should just briefly touch on it, is the JAK inhibitors. So the arthritis immunology drugs, the migraine products, the CGRP antagonists, then the lipid lowering, the PCK9 inhibitors. So, and well, these are some groups where you can say, well, probably one can switch. Probably they are relatively similar, although they are probably not with respect to their indications. But 2 groups are from oncology. So these are the PARP inhibitors and the PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors. And this is extremely difficult if you say, well, let's take the PD-1s and one of the drugs wins, then, well, these are not comparable because they really have worked differently effectively in different indications. They have totally different indications. So it's very different, especially in oncology, to really have these tenders and this kind of forcing physicians to prescribe a specific drug based on the sickness fund.
Yeah, no, agree. And I mean, you're just looking from outside, right? This is basically an additional penalty. Even after you have maybe gone through a successful AMNOG and price negotiation, you're ending up maybe in such a group, or maybe when the group is even expanded into other kind of, let's say, disease areas, or maybe, let's say, product groups, then you might still maybe not have the sales you have expected, and maybe not the commercial success as well, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So it is the idea of the Finance Commission who proposed this was, well, those drugs are comparable. They all have no or minor benefit in between them, but this is especially for the PD-1s not true, because we see a great big product like pembrolizumab has a huge number of different benefits reaching from no to considerable. So it's not that homogeneous as the Finance Commission probably thinks it is. And then they say they want to induce competition because those drugs are similar, and effectiveness is similar, and we want to have more competition. But this is a very unfair competition with tenders. We know that this very, very rough competition with all the power on one side. And as a company, you cannot do anything but just go down with the price. You cannot argue for a specific patient's characteristic, for specific segments of patients where the drug is suited better than other drugs. So it's very difficult, and it will be interesting to see how the discussion on these groups and this tenders for patented drugs really will go on through the process in the parliament.
Yeah, no, agree. I mean, has the additional benefit, as it's basically mentioned there as well, or the benefit itself, the comparative benefit, been defined? Is that the kind of benefit what the GBA is alluding to? I mean, even then it's difficult, right? Because sometimes you get maybe, let's say, no added benefit or a minor added benefit, but depending on the endpoints, you might have maybe a major effect, for example, on safety, but maybe no effect on the others. Yeah. And then in total, it might get too minor, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And also, if you look at the PD-1s, so over 10 years, the appropriate comparator changed. So no added benefit versus, let's say, pembrolizumab means you're as good as pembrolizumab, which is the most successful product in the world. So that's something different when you say, well, we compare something like nivolumab to old chemotherapy in melanoma 10 years ago. So that changed. The Finance Commission indeed said, well, the GBA should define this group, but now the government has done that, or the Ministry of Health, and it's not related to the additional benefit. So I think those are taken because probably there are a lot of sales and expenditures in these groups, and probably they think, well, they are comparable enough to run this tenders. I'm not convinced, especially not for the oncology groups. I think there is a lot of difference between the different pharmaceutical ingredients. So that doesn't make sense for me in the end.
No, I'm totally with you. I think this is probably the most difficult one in terms of the impact and the additional uncertainty on top, because I mean, you can long plan, with your trial and the kind of AMNOG submission and strategy around it. Maybe you can even get a good added benefit, and suddenly you're in such of those groups, or maybe the groups are increased, right? And then suddenly you're in a totally different game. I mean, just the game after the initial game.
Yeah, it's a second game. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really a double regulation of innovative drugs. Difficult.
Yeah, let's just see. I mean, wrapping that all a bit up, and I think we could probably speak about impacts on other kind of areas of the law even further. But I mean, you have also been in the industry before, quite some long time ago. So you also see that a bit from Ixel now, which I think is really great. I mean, what are your recommendations if industry would now come back to you and just say, Thomas, give us maybe the one or two key things to watch out, or maybe do even in the next, let's say, 12 months?
Well, one is, of course, the political process. So the association of the pharmaceutical companies really have to bring in their arguments to find a balance between the clear objective of the Ministry of Health to say contribution rates should be kept stable. So everybody in the healthcare field, the hospitals, the physicians, dentists, even the sickness funds and the taxpayers have to bring some money or some savings to keep the system running. That would be important, to bring in the arguments to say, well, I think that with the tenders, that doesn't make sense for this and this good reasons. And the dynamic rebate can be exaggerating, especially if you go beyond 2030. But in the end, we have to consider we need to the industry has to bring their contribution to the savings overall and to the development of a more efficient healthcare system. I think they can offer a lot in that. The second point is, look what will happen in the next few weeks, what will be the outcome, and then adapt to it. Then rethink your strategies concerning price volume agreements, the negotiated price, because there will be additional rebates, and you have to think at first to say, well, dynamic rebate can be something like 8 or 10% in a few years' time. So we have to find a stronger position in the price negotiations. Otherwise, you will see slow growth or even stabilization of sales in Germany.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. Perfect. I think, Thomas, thanks a lot for the insights. That was, I think, very useful for the listeners. I mean, I've just recognized, I told you before we had the recording, the last couple of few weeks, that a lot of people were still, let's say, with some of the old proposals and all the kind of like, it's of course difficult, especially when you're not into German, but also not maybe around the German process, to keep up to pace as well. So thanks a lot for that. Highly recommended. I'm sure we hear each other again in that show. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Great insights by Thomas Hammerschmidt, Professor of Pharma Management at the German University. And there are a lot of changes currently in the political debate and, of course, already in the legal political, let's call it, making. I think the next couple of weeks will be important. We need to see which ones will really happen. But currently, it looks like a lot of what has also already been proposed by the so-called Financial Committee has also been transferred into a proposed law. And I think the core ones affecting the industry are the ones exactly as Thomas already said: dynamic mandatory rebate, AMNOG changes, especially with respect to positives, of course, combination rebate out, guardrails out, but an additional piece, which is a mandatory price volume agreement, with the key thing that the formula, which is similar, which has already been proposed by the arbitration board some time ago, will then kick in from year 3 if no agreement has been achieved. And finally, which is, I think, the on top piece, is tenders for patented drugs. At least there, the first group has been defined. The first group, just for completeness, will be JAK inhibitors, CGRP antagonists, PARP inhibitors, PCK9 inhibitors, PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors, and maybe even further to come in the near future. So I think we need to see the addition, the sums of all of those different rebates might be significant, and hence, as Thomas as well already said, I think as kind of real thoughts, so is watch out what's really happening from a political process in the next couple of few weeks until summer probably, and then of course adapt towards the outcomes from a legal perspective, especially have a look on the additional rebates and the price volume agreements. That was an episode of MAP, the market access podcast provided by Mars Market Access and Pricing Strategy, which is your healthcare consultancy in the German-speaking markets. MAP is available every second week with a new episode, so watch out. And in case you might have questions, contact me directly and or visit our website on www.marketaccess-pricingstrategy.de.